Dust rolled across the plain like a slow brown wave as evening came to Eli Ward's ranch. The wind hummed around the fence posts and made a dry song against the barn boards. Eli stood by the gate with a coil of rope in his hands and a day of small worries in his head. The well was a little low. The corn was not tall enough. One of the mares had been restless since dawn. He was used to such small worries. They were the shape of his life now. Since he had lost his wife a few years back, the work had become both his duty and his quiet company. He knew every creak of the barn and every step between house and tack room. He knew how the last light touched the rafters in orange stripes, and how the dust made a soft haze when the sun slid down. He went into the barn to check that the doors were set for the night, and that the hay was covered. The air inside was warm with a soft grassy smell. He paused, looking at his tools on the wall, the hammer, the rasp, the little tin of nails, and he thought again of the mare. She did not like the wind. He turned toward her stall and stopped. The straw had a new shape in the shadowed corner, like a low, curled mound that did not belong to any animal he owned. He stood very still, letting his eyes adjust. He heard a gentle breath. Then he saw a pair of eyes watching him, steady, alert, not afraid but careful. He lifted his hands a little to show he meant no harm. The figure in the straw pushed up slowly, a woman about his age wrapped in a worn saddle blanket. Her dark hair was braided and dusty. Her face showed the day's heat and a long road, but also a calm strength. She did not look ready to run, yet she did not look ready to trust. She held a small pouch close to her chest as if it were the most important thing she owned. Eli spoke in a low voice, the way one might soothe a nervous colt. He said hello, said she could keep still if she wished, said he would do nothing rash. The woman studied him, then nodded once. When she spoke, her English was careful but clear, with a light music to the words. She said she needed water, and only a little food if it would not be a trouble. He told her that would be fine, and he went to the house and came back with a tin cup and a plate with bread and a piece of cheese. He set both down a few steps away and took a step back. She reached for the cup and drank with small, steady sips. Then she ate, keeping one hand on the pouch as if it gave her courage just to touch it. He saw a cut along her forearm. It was shallow, not fresh, but it looked sore. He asked if he could clean it, and he waited. After a moment, she nodded again. He brought warm water, clean cloth, and a little jar of salve. He worked slowly and told her what he was doing at each step. She watched his hands as if the truth of a person might live in how they used their fingers, gentle or rough, rushed or patient. He was not a doctor, but he knew how to keep a scrape from turning worse. When he finished, she flexed her fingers and seemed pleased that it no longer stung. He did not ask her name right away. People sometimes needed to keep it. He said his name was Eli Ward. He told her this was a small place, not much to look at, but it stood, and he was trying to make it stand for another year and then another. The woman lifted her chin and looked up at the rafters. She said the barn was strong. She said the roof kept the wind in its place. He liked that way of speaking, clear, simple, and exact. After a while, she said he could call her Alina. She did not say if it was her true name. It sounded real enough, and he did not press. She explained in short, careful sentences that some men from town had put her name on a paper saying she was wanted. Eli knew such papers. He had seen them nailed to the wall near the feed store. He also knew that words on a paper could run ahead of facts until they felt like facts. He kept his voice plain and asked if she was in danger. She said the men had been riding along the ridge. They were asking questions. They might come to the ranch by and by. She had tried to keep to dry creek beds and mesquite thickets, but the dust made it hard to leave no trace. He told her she could rest in the loft for now. He said there must be no light, not even a small one, because the wind could make a flame dance and someone might notice it. She agreed and moved toward the ladder with slow care, as if every step might be heard across the whole county. On the way, the mare tossed her head with a worried sound. Alina paused and reached out a hand. She made a small, breathy sound, not words, more like a meadow sound, soft and even. The mare's ears flicked forward. The animal settled, relaxed, and began to chew a little hay. Eli, surprised, smiled. Alina shrugged and said that horses liked to know someone was listening. She slept in the loft while Eli finished his rounds. He checked the corral gate twice. He tied a small bell to a loose board by the back door, so it would warn him if it moved. The sky outside turned thick with stars and the wind dropped. In the quiet, he could hear his own breath and the soft rustle of hay above him. That sound made the barn feel less empty than usual. When he went to the house for a blanket for himself, he found his mind full of questions. He decided to keep only the useful kind: what to do if riders came, where to place the lantern if he needed to talk at the door, how to explain a fresh set of steps in the yard. Before midnight, a single set of hooves approached from the road. The sound rose and fell, then stopped at the gate. Eli picked up the lantern, kept the door half closed, and waited. A familiar voice asked if all was well. It was Deputy Crane, who had a habit of looking past a person's words to count what might be kept indoors. Eli said all was well. The deputy made a show of checking the fences. He asked if any strangers had come by. Eli said only the wind and a stray crow. The deputy laughed a little and then was quiet. Eli could feel his gaze moving over the house, the yard, the barn, as if the man's eyes were fingers tapping for hollow spots. After a moment, the deputy said there had been trouble at the trader's office. Some papers were missing and some money was not where it should be. Eli said he hoped the mistake could be set right. The deputy said the trader was a man of standing. Eli answered that standing was fine and truth was better. There was a pause. Then the deputy nodded and said to sleep with doors latched. He rode on, the sound of hooves growing soft and then gone. When the air was still again, Eli carried a bucket to the cistern. Alina, awake and quiet at the loft edge, watched him. She said he should look at the far side of the tank. He frowned, surprised, and walked around. There he found a thin, steady drip. The leather at the joint had dried and shrunk. He would not have noticed it until morning. He thanked her and made a quick patch with a strip of cloth and a wedge of pine. She smiled, and in that small, calm smile he saw someone used to watching a place and keeping it safe, a person with a habit of care. She came down the ladder and stood near the stall door. She held up the little pouch and asked if he wanted to see what was inside. He said only if she wished. She opened it and showed him a small beaded charm and a folded scrap of paper. The charm looked old and well-loved. The beads were set in a pattern like rain tracks on sand. The paper, when she showed the edge, had pointed numbers and neat lines like notes from a ledger. She said quietly that a trader had made a deal with her family for hides and grain. The numbers had not matched after the weighing. There had been a talk, and then later the trader had said the ledger was missing and blamed her. She closed the pouch again and held it near her heart. She said the charm reminded her that things have a proper weight, even when people forget. Eli listened and asked only the kind of questions that helped him understand the shape of the matter, the date of the deal, the number of sacks, the name on the receipt. She answered with clear memory, not in a rush, not angry, just steady. He could tell she liked to tell things the way a good fence runs, straight with clean corners. He felt a quiet respect. He also felt the pressure of the night deepening, like the dark was a big hand pressing on the roof. Eli went to the house and returned with a thin mattress for the loft. He also brought a clean bandage for her arm and a piece of apple. They stood by the ladder and shared it, each taking a small bite. It was not much, but the sweetness seemed to lift the air. She asked about his wife in a gentle way, not to pry, but to know. He said she had been kind and strong and that the land still remembered her footsteps. He did not say much more, but Alina nodded as if she could see the shape of a memory without needing every detail. Hours passed. The ranch grew quiet as a held breath. Now and then a far coyote called, thin and musical, like a flute in the night, and then silence came back and laid itself down. Eli dozed in a chair by the barn door with the lantern out. He woke before dawn to a crisp chill and a thin stripe of pearl light along the horizon. Alina already stood near the corral watching the sky change. She moved like a person who had learned to rise with the first bird. They worked together in that gray light, he checking the harness, she sweeping the hay to hide any new marks. Her steps were light and left little trace. The ground looked as it had the day before. It was a small thing, but it might matter. The preacher stepped into the kitchen with quiet steps, brushed the road dust from his coat, and set his hat on the table. Tom stood nearby, hands folded, eyes gentle and steady. Eli and Alina stood facing each other with a simple calm that made the small room feel larger. The lantern gave a soft glow that touched the edges of their faces and left the corners of the room in a kind, restful shade. Outside, the evening air was still, and the barn beams held the day's warmth like a memory. The preacher asked a few plain questions about names, ages, and good understanding. He spoke in a low, careful voice. He explained that words carry weight and shape the path ahead, so they should be spoken with care. Eli nodded. Alina listened closely, her eyes bright but calm like a person reading the wind. She said she wished for words that made room for truth and respect. The preacher smiled, as if that answer fit the whole of his work. They made their promises in simple terms. They said they would look out for each other, keep one another safe with honest choices, and give each other space to be fully themselves. They said they would not use these promises to hold the other down. They would use the promises like a roof against rain and like a fence that keeps things clear, but has a gate that opens. Tom signed as a witness with slow, neat letters. The preacher wrote the date, the place, and a short note about the calm spirit of the evening. When he finished, he placed his hand gently on the page as if to thank it for holding their words. Afterwards, they shared coffee and a small slice of bread with apple jam. No one hurried. The preacher told a short story about a couple he had married at dawn by a river, and how those two planted cottonwoods that now shaded a long stretch of bank. He said the best promises make shade for others too, not just for the two who speak them. Eli thought of the neighbors who sometimes came by for water when the summer ran long. Alina thought of her family and how a fair path in one place can open a fair path in another. When the preacher and Tom left, the night settled again. The kitchen seemed to hold a fresh stillness, as if the air itself had listened. Alina folded the small paper with the faint figures, the sample from the trader's ledger, and slipped it into her pouch beside the beaded charm. She touched the charm with a light thumb, as if checking the seam of a well-made glove, and then looked at Eli. He met her look with the same steady warmth he'd carried all day. No one said big words. They did not need to. The quiet between them felt like clean water, clear, simple, and good to drink. They slept a few hours, Eli in the chair by the door, Alina in the loft, then woke before sunrise to the soft chill that comes just before day. They moved with easy teamwork. Eli heated water and swept the step. Alina checked the barn floor, smoothing any marks. She hummed a low tune, and the mare stirred and gave a slow, friendly breath. The first light gathered in a pale ribbon along the eastern sky. Birds started their small, cheerful sounds one after another like beads on a string. By full morning, wheels sounded on the road and a few riders came along the fence line. They were not loud. Their voices carried the tone of people who believed they were doing their job. Eli stepped into the yard with open hands and a calm face. Alina stood just inside the barn door, in view but not on display, wearing a simple shawl that covered her shoulders. She faced the morning, not hiding but not inviting chatter either. The deputy, who had come the night before, raised his hand in greeting. His eyes moved from Eli to Alina and then back again, measuring the ground the way a person does when picking away across a stream. Eli spoke first, friendly and firm. He said the ranch had a new household today, and that he and his wife were busy with morning tasks. He mentioned the preacher's visit as one might mention the weather, calmly, without show. Tom, standing near the gate with a small toolbox, nodded in agreement, not adding more, simply confirming. The deputy seemed to swallow a question and then shaped his words with more care. He asked if he might speak with them at the fence in clear air, with everyone able to hear. That seemed fair. They all walked to the fence where the shade of a small mesquite made a pattern on the dust. The deputy explained that the trader in town had suffered a loss and had said certain papers had gone missing. He said he was still looking into it because the numbers did not quite add up. He added that he was speaking as a person first and an officer second, and as a person he liked things clear and true. He turned his hat around in his hands, thinking, and then asked if there was anything that might shed light on the matter. His tone was not sharp. It was careful, like someone leaning close to a keyhole to hear a faint sound. Alina stepped forward a little, just enough that her voice would carry well. She said she held a small sample of figures that matched a page in the trader's ledger. She said the sample had dates, weights, and a fair price that did not match what was later claimed. She said she wished no harm to anyone, only a clear look at the truth. She also said that as of last night she was part of this house, and the house was a place of peace and any talk should be done with respect. The deputy nodded, taking that in as if it eased him in some deep way. Eli suggested they look at the paper together. He set a small plank on the fence post to make a smooth writing shelf. The deputy leaned close. The riders shifted in their saddles but did not press in. Tom stood to the side, gaze steady on the horizon, giving everyone the feeling that there was space enough for patience. The paper showed neat figures, though faint. and a date that matched the day Alina had said. The deputy's lips moved as he read the numbers twice. Then he asked if he might carry a copy to the county clerk for comparison. Eli said he would ride with him and that would be better. The deputy agreed at once. They arranged a simple plan. Eli would go to town with the deputy after lunch. Alina would remain at the ranch with Tom nearby, not as guard but as company and witness if anyone had questions. The riders returned to town along the road, not in a rush, more like people going back to a puzzle they hoped to finish. When the dust settled, the ranch felt quiet again, but the quiet was lighter now, like a window opened to let in a good breeze. At noon, Eli and the deputy set out. The ride to town took a couple of hours with open land on both sides and a wide sky that seemed to study them as they went. They spoke a little about wells, fence wire, and the new schoolhouse being planned. The deputy said he liked when a place grew wiser rather than just bigger. Eli said growth without sense is like a corral without a gate, good for looking right until someone needs to pass. The deputy laughed softly and said he would borrow that line. In town, they went straight to the county office. The clerk was a tidy man with careful hands and a fondness for order. He heard their request and brought the ledger from a locked drawer. He set it on the table with the care a baker might give a fresh loaf. They matched the date from the sample to the page in the ledger and found the entry. The clerk bent over the lines and traced the sums. He frowned a little, then fetched a smaller book from the shelf, a record of daily weights from the scale by the wagons. He checked the two books together, moving back and forth between them like a tailor comparing pieces of cloth. At last he nodded slowly. The weights agreed with the smaller book, but not with the main ledger. Something had been changed later. The clerk did not say a big word like wrong. He simply said, "This is not a fit match." He wrote a short note on official paper and added his name in careful strokes. Eli and the deputy thanked him and walked to the trader's place. The trader stood behind his counter with a polite smile that did not fully reach his eyes. The deputy spoke in a clear, kind tone. He said there were numbers that asked for a second look. The trader's smile thinned. He reached for the ledger and flipped to the page, his fingers moving too fast. The deputy set the clerk's note beside the book and waited. The trader's shoulders changed shape, just a little, not like a person facing blame. More like someone seeing a path close and another open. He released a slow breath and said that perhaps an assistant had entered a line in error, and perhaps he himself had not checked as closely as he should have. The deputy did not argue. He simply asked that a correction be made and that any worry placed on others be lifted. By late afternoon, a fresh note was added to the ledger. The clerk stamped a copy for the county office. The deputy wrote a short release that said the search for Alina would stop. The words were simple and final, like a gate swung open and the latch set quiet. Eli felt a warmth in his chest that was not pride, not triumph, just a thankful ease, like finding that a deep well is still sweet.